You read that title. The Ultimate Cliffhanger is not ultimate anymore. I know I'm probably going to raise a lot of hands for this one, but I honestly just want to talk to you guys about how the Ultimate Cliffhanger is not so ultimate anymore. And that's because it is really easy compared to what it once was. And I'm going to show you guys that by taking a look back at the history of the Ultimate Cliffhanger from its first introduction in the first AEW tournament and into the most recent ones. I'm most only referring to its appearance in AEW. Its appearance in Sasuke is basically irrelevant to me, but it's aside from talking about the first 3 seasons of the show when it was in Sasuke. Those we'll talk about to kind of give a build up to what Ultimate Cliffhanger became when we get into the Vegas side of things. But genuinely anything before Sasuke 23, as that was the tournament that AW1 was a part of, is not important to me. So let's talk about the Cliffhanger in Sasuke 23, also known as the Shin Cliffhanger. The Shin Cliffhanger was the 4th variation of the Cliffhanger already seen on Sasuke. Again, like I said before, I'm not here to talk about the cliffhangers before that. But what I am here to talk about is what its effect was on AEW and American competitors as a whole. The Shin Cliffhanger had 3 ledges. First ledge was just a simple straight line. The second was a diagonal, and the third one was a little bit off to the side that you had to swing to in order to make. Only one American ended up attempting this cliffhanger, that being Levi Muhlenberg. Levi isn't really well known nowadays, but was well known back then. It was probably the top American competitor ever really at the time. Levi made it to the Cliffhanger twice. Once in Sasuke 20 and once in Sasuke 23. In Sasuke 20, he made it to the final ledge of the Cliffhanger, where he lost his grip and fell, being the last man standing of that tournament. In Sasuke 23, he was one of several people who got to try this shit in Cliffhanger. He ended up getting even less further than he did last time, despite training for this obstacle. He ended up not being able to make the reach to the second ledge, being the last man standing of all the Americans in AEW 1, however not really making a dent in terms of becoming the last man standing in the Sasuke tournament, as that had several other competitors make it all the way to stage 4 in fact. Right. The Shin Cliffhanger wasn't really all that difficult when comparing it to other Cliffhanger, when comparing it to the Cliffhangers we would see later on. It's basically the prototype of what would become the Ultimate Cliffhanger, especially in the eyes of it just being AEW. Especially in the eyes of AEW, with it being the only tournament to not have the Ultimate Cliffhanger trademark, as well as, the only tournament to not have the Ultimate Cliffhanger base model. Every other tournament would look like it, at least in some form, we'll get there, but genuinely, this might as well be the prototype version of the Ultimate Cliffhanger. And it was somewhat difficult, but if I'm being perfectly honest, it's not that bad. Still a difficult Cliffhanger, but would only really set the stage for things to come. Then we have AEW 2, which saw the introduction of the Ultimate Cliffhanger in the actual tournament. This was technically not this revision's debut, as its debut was in Sasuke 25. However, AEW 2 took place in Sasuke 26, so we're going to be talking about it in the broad forms of Sasuke 26 and 27 as it appeared on AEW. So this Cliffhanger was a radically redesigned version of the Shin Cliffhanger from the previous tournament. The Shin Cliffhanger only had 3 ledges. This one had 6. In Sasuke 25, it was actually easier than it was in Sasuke 26. Sasuke 26 has added a reach. Sasuke 26 added a big reach to the ones from the 3rd to 4th ledges. It's just a big reach that you have to really stretch for, and it was actually really difficult to make. That was not there on the Sasuke 25 version. After that, there was a tiny small ledge you had to lachey to, and finally another ledge to lachey that you had to land afterwards. At that point, you can make your way over to the landing pad. This obstacle was really difficult, and we saw 2 Americans try it during AEW 2, those being David Campbell and Brent Stevenson. Brent ended up failing on the third ledge, basically gaining no momentum to attempt to reach for the fourth. Campbell did get one hit on the fourth ledge. However, when trying to cross his hands, he ended up falling. This being the farthest any American had gotten to at that point. In Sasuke 27 or AEW 3, every American who got to stage 3 got to the cliffhanger. Got to the ultimate cliffhanger, and every single one of them fell in different spots. The obstacle was difficult and was almost conquered by David Campbell. However, Campbell had a more of a technical issue with the chalk that he was spraying on his hands. That ended up making him slip off at the very end. Flip off the very end due to making his hands kind of gooey. So, because of that, he did not become the first American to complete the ultimate cliffhanger, but ultimately probably should have been. This cliffhanger itself was really difficult. Again, each ledge would get deeper and deeper in diameter and would be harder and harder to hang on to. And this is basically the mantra for that cliffhanger, getting harder and harder and harder. However, after Sasuke 27, things would begin to change, as Sasuke 27 was meant to be the last tournament. However, AEW would blow up here in the West, so NBC picked it up for another season, where they ended up making a course in Las Vegas in Season 4. This course was one half a version of the Ultimate Cliffhanger, which would be almost exactly the same as the one seen in Sasuke 27 or AEW 3. This cliffhanger angle was very different. This cliffhanger angle had one major difference, and that was the cheaper ledges that they use, making this cliffhanger a lot easier than it was in Sasuke 27. It was for this reason that Brent Stephenson was able to complete it in AEW 4. Once again, no changes in layout or anything. It was exactly the same. And this is how it would remain into AEW 6. In AEW 7, they did do a small modification to the cliffhanger. They broke the first 3 ledges into about 9 mini ledges, spreading them against 3 each, diagonally across 3 each. Then, everything else remained the same into the final ledge. Due to the requirement made in Sasuke a couple years back to do a 180 turn on the cliffhanger, this was required here as well. They added a something that felt very last minute. A extra cliffhanger ledge that you had to lachey to that was really close to the dismount. Unlike Sasuke, you could turn around to face the cliffhanger. To face the final ledge, which most Americans did. The only exception being Joe Molaski, who tried to do the 180 turn but failed. This version of the cliffhanger was still difficult, and again made it a lot harder. But I can't really say too much more on it aside from that. Transition at the end only took out Jeremiah Morgan, with everyone else making it. But you already know what happened in AEW 7. And it was probably because of that they decided to do a massive revision of it for the next season. The cliffhanger scene in AWA was a rapid change, and in my opinion, the hardest version of the obstacle we've seen. The obstacle did not change into the 5th, up till the 4th ledge. After you made that big reach to the 4th ledge, there was a foothold that you could use to transition to the other side. A 180 turn. It's a 180 turn to another set of ledges on the other side. This was a difficult transition, and felt way more planned than the AW7 version. You then had to make another lachey to another set of cliffhanger edges that were even smaller in diameter than the previous ones. If you made this, then you had to jump back to the actual cliffhanger, and then dismount. This variation of the obstacle is definitely the perfect one, actually making it really difficult, and again, way more difficult than every other version. It kind of just zigzagged the competitors, and then having them go back and forth from each ledge. 2 competitors ended up attempting this year. Daniel Gale, who was knocked out out by trying to transition to the second set of ledges, and Drew Dressel, who ended up completing it. Nothing else to really say here, but this Cliffhanger is definitely the best version of the obstacle. The obstacle would stay the same going to AW 9, however, would get a little bit of an addition going to AW 10. And AW10 saw a more of a stylistic change to the Cliffhanger. Designed to make it a bunch of pieces of plexiglass with Cliffhanger ledges mounted onto it. This did make the obstacle a little bit easier, as it did remove the big reach from the third to fourth ledges. However, this was nothing really changed, as you still had that 180 flip and still the jump back to the older Cliffhanger. However, the transition from the fifth and sixth sections could easily be reached and did not need to be jumped to, unlike the previous version. So it was a little bit easier, but despite this, both competitors ended up attempting it, Sean Bryan and Drew Dressel, both fell on the final leap. Now, AW10's result is irrelevant to this conversation, but this Cliffhanger wasn't really any different than the last version, so it is a little bit confusing that both fell right here. It is pretty probable that Drew Dressel was failing more on purpose. It's quite clear that Dressel wasn't really trying to win, but that's outside of the point here. The very next season, in AW11, the Cliffhanger would be given a massive alteration and be made a lot easier. There was still that upwards climb you had to make for the first 3 ledges. Then they made you travel across a couple more ledges without any kind of big reach or anything until you got to the 7th ledge, where you had to leap to another ledge on the other side. This leap being more akin to the leap in the AW7 version of the obstacle, as you did not have to do a 180 like in AW8 and 9's version. Instead, you just had to, and you could turn around and just jump to the Cliffhanger, which is a lot easier. After that, just make a transition to the other side of the ledge, and then you were done. No transition back to the actual Cliffhanger needed. As you can probably tell, this version of the obstacle was, well, yes, technically larger, was still a little bit easier. Again, it wasn't as dynamic and complicated as that other version. It was definitely, well, yes, it was still a difficult obstacle. This is when it became not so ultimate in my eyes. As again, it wasn't as difficult here. In Season 13 and 14, the same variation would return. The obstacle was basically the same going into both tournaments, even though there was a total victory in AW11. Each of those tournaments had one person fail the Cliffhanger. Kyle Shoulderman for Season 13 and Flip Rodriguez for Season 14. So that leaves the question that you guys are probably asking. Why isn't the Cliffhanger ultimate anymore? The reason is because it kind of is just oversaturated. Actually, the Cliffhanger is a lot easier than it once was. And because of that, it kind of defeats the purpose of the word ultimate as its descriptor. This was the ultimate Cliffhanger, the version seen in Seasons 8 and 9. This is not ultimate. I can definitely say it's a Cliffhanger, but again, it has never felt right in any of the seasons it's been in. And ever since the version was changed in NW11 to make it a lot easier, I honestly didn't get it. I understand that that the 2 people to make it there weren't able to complete it, but let's be completely honest here. AW10 was kind of cursed from that. AW10 had a very difficult stage 2, and because of that, only 2 people made it to stage 3. So in that way, it really wasn't the fault of the Cliffhanger model itself. It was more the fault of the producers who designed that terrible stage 2 course. And if you want me to complain about that stage 2 course, stay tuned for my stage 2 deep dive in the national finals, as I do plan to still do that sometime. Who knows? But that's basically my full-on opinion. So the last thing I want to talk about is Season 15. Now as of recording this, Season 15's version of the Cliffhanger has not been shown to us. However, do I think they will change it? Nope. I don't see any reason for them to actually change it. Because, honestly, I don't think they find a problem with the Cliffhanger being this easy. I think they found the perfect balance, especially since it hasn't been changed within the last 3 tournaments. It's still been the same since AW 11, and to me, that basically tells me that nothing is going to change going into Season 15, and that's going to suck. However, what would I do differently? What would I change about the Cliffhanger? I would now, I am going to preference that I don't really like what Sasuke is doing with the Cliffhanger either. They added mechanisms to the Cliffhanger so it moved in and out and up and down as you were preparing for your transition to the other side. That version of the Cliffhanger is definitely really difficult and deserves its own place, but I don't really think it's meant for AW. I would personally revert it back to the AW 8 version of the Cliffhanger and go no questions asked. But if you wanted me to make an addition to the Cliffhanger, that's where things get tricky. I would probably just want to change that final edge that you transition back to the Cliffhanger to one of the smaller ledges, as it could make the jump a little bit more difficult. That's really the only change I would really want to make, I guess. But honestly, just bring back how it looked in AW 8. I think I'm personally fine with the plexiglass. I don't think it hinged how it did in AW 10, but it still is half of the problem here. The Cliffhanger doesn't feel as grand because it doesn't have that big wall that it was designed on originally. And that's part of the issue. Of course, the structure of the obstacle being missing parts that made the original Cliffhanger so difficult is also the reason. And yeah, I think that's my whole opinion on the ultimate Cliffhanger as of now. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. So yeah, this is kind of just, once again, one of those solo discussion videos where I wanted to just talk about something, give out an opinion, and maybe have you guys go in the comments and say what you think about the whole ordeal. But this is honestly an opinion thing, and I just really wanted to talk about the ultimate Cliffhanger, as it's something that's been lingering on, and something I have been wanting to discuss separately as its own video. But anyway, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.